out of the 300 state-required district-developed end-of-course assessments, we are eliminating all but 10.
Too many tests, not enough learning. One of America's largest school districts is on the warpath about this educational failure, choosing to ditch 97% of its end-of-the-year exams to make the point. Lawmakers are considering a rewrite of the legislation requiring standardized testing for schools receiving federal funds. But some say the proposed changes aren't enough. Some might also counter for the feds to get off their back and let the teachers actually teach. Let's get to it. Our guest is Senior Director at the national law firm Greenberg Traurig, former U.S. Senator from Arkansas who helped shape the No Child Left Behind Act, Tim Hutchinson. Tim, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Ed, good to be with you today.
Let's get into this a little bit. Here's Miami-Dade County cutting the number of district-created exams from 300 to 10. Is this the beginning of a necessary revolution? And perhaps, just perhaps, do we have to lean back a little bit and say maybe No Child Left Behind was a little too heavy-handed?
Well, I think yes. First of all, there's a general reaction to the over-reliance upon testing. And I think a reaction to too much of that being centralized in Washington. And No Child Left Behind, though very sincerely, I think, passed and in the most sincere belief that it was going to improve accountability and expectations for students, went too far. And it really turned what had been Republican orthodoxy on its head by centralizing and expanding the role of the Federal Department of Education, when only a few years before that, when I was elected to the House, we were trying to abolish the Department of Education. But George W. Bush put a lot of political capital behind his belief in the necessity of accountability and testing. But yes, we are reverting. We're changing the approach of federal law. The bill that passed in the Help Committee, the Lamar Alexander-Patty Murray agreement, gives the states much greater flexibility. Still requires testing, but it's going to allow the states to decide what those tests how they ought to be written and what they ought to include. It's going to be a big change.
Then I guess where's the happy medium here? Because we don't want to churn out dumber kids, if you will. We also want to give them some sort of preparation for the realities of life. And many teachers I speak to, that's what they say. They say that all of this testing doesn't get the kids ready for what they're going to face once they are out in the real world. So what's that median now that we have to draw to make this work, make everybody happy?
Well, hopefully we're going to strive toward it, and that federal policymakers are going to strive toward that medium. Yes, teachers complain that they're teaching to the test, that they're constantly preparing students to do a test as opposed to spending the time in creative teaching and doing, I think, what most of us grew up in a classroom expecting and hoping that a teacher would do. So there is a balance. The problem is we don't have, how do you measure student achievement apart from a test?
Now there's a good question. Let's stop right there, Senator. How do you do that? Because people will say that comes down to the real life, but you and I both know, having to go to school, don't you have to get tests in order to find out exactly what you've been taught and how good a job the teachers are doing and how good the kid is?
Yeah, I don't think you can abolish tests, and we want to know, is the teacher doing a good job? Are those students learning? How do they compare with other schools? How do they compare with other classrooms? And so there is a balance, but I don't think you can get away from the requirement of testing, and it is one of the key measures, not the only one, but one of the key measures in what's happening in that classroom, what's happening in that school. Is the school failing? Are we losing kids because of failing schools?
Then what needs to be done in this revision, in your opinion?
Well, I think first of all, you're not going to have a bill that everybody's going to like. Conservatives are going to object to some of the provisions in it, and they're not going to think it went far enough. And absolutely, I can guarantee you progressives are going to object to the fact that you're giving the states so much more latitude. I think this is far overdue, and it's a credit to the leadership of Lamar Alexander and being able to work a compromise that strikes a balance. And this is years overdue in the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It's good to see the Senate working. It's good to see that Congress is actually producing some legislation. It's an act in pragmatism. It's not ideologically pure from anybody's standpoint, But I think it's a big step in restoring the role of the states and the local school districts and reducing the heavy-handed role of the Department of Education.
30 seconds left. Do we have to make sure that what happened in Georgia doesn't happen anywhere else, where teachers are basically cheating the system and cheating the kids at the same time because they want to get their good grades?
Well, and that's what it's led to in too many places, and I think that's part of the reason there's been such a revolt against not only Common Core and a heavy-handed federal role, but also just the over-reliance upon these tests and looking to them alone as the measure of success. So hopefully we're going to see this year productive Congress that's going to act upon this and going to reflect the concerns that parents and teachers have expressed across the country.
Your lips to the educators' ears. Former Senator Tim Hutchinson, thanks so much for joining us. We will continue to follow this story as well.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, it's about time that we got down to the business of teaching the kids and making them learn. The Hard Line continues.